Good evening. I'm Kimberly Crenshaw, Executive Director of the African American Policy Forum. Together with the Center for Intersectionality and Social Policy Studies and our partners at the National Birth Equity Collective, we're thrilled to welcome you to the second day and the second screening of our annual series, Her Dream Deferred, a week on the status of Black women. This evening, we'll be having a talk back on the eye-opening film we just watched, AFTERSHOCK. Directed by Tonya Lewis-Lee and Paula Eiselt, the film delves into the silent crises of maternal mortality of Black women across the United States. It features the tragic deaths of Shawnee Gibson and Amber Rose Eiselt. As Variety notes in their glowing review, AFTERSHOCK is a vital and moving documentary that shows the lives behind the shameful statistics. Central to the film are the multiple intersectional failures that transform what should be the sacred and transformative birthing process into a fraught and potentially lethal encounter for Black women. As is described in the film by mother-to-be Felicia Ellis, we can think of Black women giving birth as being the equivalent of a Black man at a traffic stop. The film names the tortured history of Black women's lack of sexual autonomy and their reproductive vulnerability. It links their current vulnerability to what Helena Grant calls the white patriarchal medical technocratic model of childbirth, a model which was never made with Black people's needs in mind. Presented with the power of moving stories, trenchant analysis, and hidden histories, both the uninitiated and veterans of the movement for birth equity will be deeply moved and activated. So today, I'm more than pleased to be in the company of the directors of the film and the cast, all of whom are advocates in raising awareness about the appalling maternal health crises facing this country. Tonya Lewis-Lee is a director, producer, and writer whose work explores the personal impact of social justice issues. Tonya served as executive producer on the series She's Gotta Have It and produced Monster, which premiered at the 2018 Sundance Film Festival. Tonya is the co-director and co-producer of AFTERSHOCK. IndieWire named Tonya as one of the 22 rising female filmmakers to watch in 2022. Paula Eiselt is an independent filmmaker based in New York who directs and produces feature films about unforgettable characters thriving in unbelievable circumstances. She is the co-director and co-producer of AFTERSHOCK. Her previous feature, 93 Queen, now streaming on HBO Max, was released theatrically across the US and broadcast worldwide, starting with PBS's POV. IndieWire named Paula one of the 22 rising filmmakers to watch in 2022. Shawnee Benton Gibson is the mother of Shawnee Gibson. She is the CEO of Spirit of a Woman Leadership Development Institute, as well as the co-founder of the Oriah Foundation. The Oriah Foundation, created in her daughter's memory, works to stop the devastation of Black maternal mortality. She has over 30 years of administrative, clinical, and executive coaching experience with expertise in women's leadership, reproductive justice, racial equity, and trauma counseling. Omari Maynard is the father of Anari and Kari and the partner of Shawnee Gibson. He is an educator by training and an artist by craft. He has worked for the NBA, sports marketing companies, not-for-profit organizations, and the Department of Education. He, with Shawnee Benton Gibson, is the co-founder of the Oriah Foundation, started in Shawnee's memory. And Bruce McIntyre is the father of Elias and partner of Amber Rose Eiselt. He founded the Save a Rose Foundation after tragically losing Amber. Since then, Bruce has become a fearless advocate for families experiencing racial disparities in the medical system. He is currently working on bringing a midwifery-led birthing center to the Bronx. Welcome to all of my guests. So I want to start with Omari and Bruce. I think one of the most moving things for me was seeing a story about maternal mortality that isn't just a statistic, that's number one, but importantly, that deals with something that we call the loss of the loss. In Say Her Name, we've talked about the erasure of Black women who have been killed by the police, and the fact that families of women who've been killed by the police are erased from our consciousness around the issue. And until I saw this film, that was the only loss of the loss that I'd really thought about until I saw both of you. African-American fathers who lost their partners to this horrific crisis. And it hit me that we have not fully understood the issue, haven't even fully imagined it without voices like yours. So I want to start with both of you, first of all, to ask, what is it that you think makes it so, this experience of seeing you all such a rarity? Why is this issue not one in which the voices of people like you, partners who've lost their partners, fathers who are raising children without their mothers, what's behind the absence? And what are you hoping that your willingness to share this story will do to the way people understand the urgency of this issue? Omari, let me start with you.
Awesome. First of all, before I answer this question, thank you so much for having all of us on this platform. Ms. Crenshaw, you're amazing. You do amazing work, and your team is, y'all are profound. Y'all are definitely profound, and y'all are bringing education and light to things that are usually quelled. So thank you so much for having us. Just to answer your question, I feel like, I mean, so my personal opinion is that, we, as far as people who are in the work and know the statistics, and there's 700 to 900 women who pass away every year, and I feel like with specifically due to maternal mortality. And I just kind of think about Shamani's homegoing service. So when Shamani passed away, there were hundreds, and I mean hundreds of people at our homegoing services. We had a huge tertian. There was still people outside, just wanting to be in the space and being affected by Shamani's passing. And that kind of really got me to thinking that, like I said, the statistics are 700 to 900 women who pass away every year, but that's 700 to 900, fathers who are without their, their partner. And then, of course, now we're talking about thousands of fathers and children without their mothers, and then hundreds of thousands of family members who are affected by these women's loss, so it's not necessarily just, the women who have been tragically affected, but also the families who have to carry this kind of burden. And I feel like, for me, being able to speak to fathers specifically is done because I was reached out by a father. And I think that the emotional tie that really created it was the vulnerability behind that in itself, right? For a man, a Black man specifically, who I've never met, who I don't know, who I have no ties to, reached out to me out of the blue to give my condolences, one, because of the fact that, my partner passed, but also knows exactly where I'm at emotionally, because they've experienced the same tragedy. And in that is the vulnerability that says, yo, I've cried, I'm angry, I'm upset, I'm sad, I don't know how to navigate this, but I still want to offer my condolences to you and your family, and whatever you need to get through it, you can, hit me up. You have a conduit through me, So just, I think that in itself is a rarity, that we just don't experience, So I feel like because of that, we feel like we have to carry certain things by ourselves. We can't necessarily speak out the way we want to because we just don't know. There's an ignorance around, being emotionally, having an emotional spectrum, right? Especially for a Black man, So I think that for me, being able to have that experience, my want was to then share that experience with somebody else, So that's the main reason why, I reached out to Bruce, only because of the fact that I knew, like, didn't know exactly because our circumstances are all different, but the feeling is the same, right? So, and
Yeah,
then also that understanding of, being emotionally stretching yourself.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
You know, I realized in watching the film just how rare it is to see images of, um, first of all, fathers with their children, um, images of fathers with each other, images of Black men grieving, Black men being vulnerable, and Black men supporting each other. Not that it doesn't happen, just that in the archive of filmic imagery, both documentary and fiction, these are not stories that we're used to seeing. And so consequently, the experiences that both you and Bruce had are not experiences that we're even used to imagining. So it shouldn't at this late date be an epiphany to people, that Black men are suffering these losses, and that Black men need the support of each other, and that Black men reach out to each other. That shouldn't be an epiphany, and yet it is. Bruce, can you talk about what happened when you first heard from Omari? What was your initial reaction to receiving that call?
So prior to actually receiving that call, I was reaching out to a lot of close friends of mine, people that I practically have called, my brothers, and people that I felt very close to, and just even speaking to them, and like these are the people that are like my go-tos,
Mhm.
and seeing them not be able to understand my situation or really just know how to talk to me, because sometimes we obviously need to hear that more than you're going to be okay, because we're not okay.
Yeah.
And sometimes we just need to say that we need to say that we're not okay. And I just remember feeling all these emotions, like nobody can empathize with me. There is nobody on this God's green earth that can empathize with me. And that's just how I was feeling at the time.
Mhm.
Because I had to bury my fiance, the love of my life, on my birthday.
Oh,
Uh, just really moving through those motions, and feeling the weight of that. And then, having Omari reach out to me in my time of need, was really informative and life changing, for me. And he didn't exactly know my experience, but he knew what I was going through, and he knew how I was feeling.
right.
And it left me to be open and vulnerable, because there's no way that I can lie to Omari and say, yeah, I'm fine, I'm good, I'm okay. Because he's obviously gone through the same thing that I've gone through. So really just speaking with Omari and how he navigated through grief, really just opened my eyes a bit more. And after speaking to numerous fathers, I realized that I'm not alone in this, and that there are people that are just holding so much in and not speaking, because we as Black men often don't feel like we're being heard. Sometimes we feel invisible, especially when it comes to parenting. I'll carry Elias out on a carrier, and I'm seen as an anomaly. A Black man carrying his child, and there are bystanders asking me, "Oh, you shouldn't be doing this. Where's his mother at?" You know,
Wow. Wow.
so really, really learning to have to navigate through that, and knowing that I have to play both roles of mother and father. Um, and Omari was just giving me so much inspiration and so much strength. And then finding out that he actually had to bury Shawnee on his birthday as well. So there was a lot of divine alignment going on,
Mhm.
that really truly uplifted my spirit, because I felt like I was thrown into this path of activism work and advocating for, you know, my fiance and navigating through grief. But there were other people out there going through the same thing. And speaking to a father, you know, I was asking him how he was navigating through his grief and channeling, and he wasn't handling it well. Like on the outside, he looks fine. But after really speaking to him, I found out that he was truly hurting, and wanting to jump off the roof with his children and end it all. And you know, that's just not what I want to see for us, and what I want to see for Black men. And
Yeah.
I stand alongside Omari, and I want to empower our Black men and our fathers as much as we can. And if it's, you know, if it's sharing our grief, because there's truly a lot of power behind our pain. And I think when people see that we're being vulnerable and open in these spaces, it also allows them to be vulnerable as well, so we can better understand them.
You know, you both have talked about the pressure. I just want to, you know, pursue that a bit. Omari, did you experience or have a sense that people were disciplining you or expecting you not to fully express your grief? Is there a way in which our community in particular don't know how to deal with the grief that you are experiencing, and as a consequence of their discomfort or whatever other factor are making expectations of you as to how you should be handling this tragedy?
I was saying, like Bruce, I've had people come to me and just say things that are off cuff, like, oh, you'll find somebody else quick, and, you know, like, don't worry, you'll be good. Like, it's, you know, life, things happen, you know. But for me, I've just been blessed to be in a community and just also have the know-how to know, like, where to get information from, and also just being open to the fact that, you know, just because you meet somebody for the first time doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, they don't have knowledge or information that can be shared, right? So for being in this specific community that I'm in, I've had tons of love. I had great people around me to help me get through this grieving process, which is a continuous process. But, you know, having shoulders to lean on makes it a lot easier. You know, speaking to my mother, speaking to Shawnee, speaking to, you know, just people in our collective made it a lot easier, and just really channeling out the things that just didn't need to be said or just doesn't make any sense for the path that I'm trying to go on. It's a very easy, for me, it was an easy trade-off. Doesn't necessarily mean that hearing those certain things made it, you know, better or easier either, but, you know, I've had support, which is great.
Yeah. You know, I've had a lot of loss in my life as well. Never a partner, and definitely not a parent, co-parent. And so, you know, when I think of the stupid things that people have said to me, and I combine that with what I can imagine people would say to you, a father who's just, you know, lost, you know, your partner and co-parent, it just makes me cringe, you know, just to imagine it. And at the same time, I can see so clearly how this divine alignment was so uplifting and such a core connection that then generates far more energy and presence for other fathers who are going through a similar situation. Bruce, you when the film starts and when we meet you, the loss is like fresh. You are right in the middle of it. Can you talk about your choice to open the process that you were going through right then and there to the whole world for us all to see it? What was how did you think about that, and what motivated you to bring us into such a profoundly tragic personal moment for you?
What made me do it, honestly, was just, the disparities that Amber was facing within the medical system. Due to my job, I had enough leniency to show up to all of her prenatal appointments, and I was seeing exactly how her care was given and playing out, and just really how the care that she was given, and what type of woman she was, just didn't add up to me. It didn't make sense. We're talking about a woman who was trying to earn her master's degree. She should have been walking with my son on stage to receive her master's for business development. She wanted to open schools. She really cared about the youth. She wanted to start art therapy programs. She helped me with my anxiety and depression. And, just really thinking about how unfair she was treated due to the color of her skin, really made me want to advocate. We were both advocates beforehand, but whenever she passed away, I told myself, I can't let them slide with this. I can't let them get away. I'm going to expose them in any way that I can. A way to really hurt a business is to take money out of their pockets, and that's when they really start to care for us. And Amber passed away, and I felt like I was advocating alone. I knew I wasn't, but I felt like I was advocating alone. And I was just really trying to figure out how I could amplify the work that I was doing. My brother Omari came to me with an opportunity. You asked me if I wanted to be a part of the project, and it was something that I only had to think about for a short amount of time. Because I felt, like I was speaking on divine alignment, this was the perfect opportunity for me to advocate and really highlight everything that was going on behind the scenes. And speaking to Paula and Tonya, they made it fairly easy. But I often think back to our history, like whenever Mimi Till had a open casket for Emmett Till to show how the system had done her son, what these people have done to her son, and how it was being covered up. And I felt like that's something that I also needed to expose to the world. I needed to expose how Amber was being treated as a Black woman, and what's being done behind the scenes that we're not seeing. Because not only are we fighting for our lives, but we're fighting for our children. A lot of people don't know that or understand that. But as Black men, whenever your partner passes away, we automatically have to fight for the rights of our children. I wasn't given the rights to Elias automatically. After Amber passed away, I actually had to go through a very long process. My son will be 2 April 20th of this year, and I'm just now being on his birth certificate. So this whole time I had a lack of child tax care credit, and all of these resources that should have been available and ready to me. But the system prolonged it and made that harder for me. So that's just things that I have to
added more emotionally fraught, more trauma on top of the trauma.
Yes.
I'm so glad you mentioned Mamie Till, because some of our listeners may not know Emmett Till was her son who was murdered by white racists when he visited his family down south, and they beat him beyond recognition. She made a choice to have an open casket funeral, and her quote was, she chose to do that so the world would see what they had done to her son. And many historians believe that that generation that saw the possibility that could be them was the generation that went on to become the civil rights generation, people who were teenagers when Emmett Till was killed at 14 were the ones who went on to become the freedom riders and the ones who went on to demand equal justice. The notion being that things that are swept under the rug, injustices that people cannot truly visualize, can often be injustices that are allowed to continue. So her choice was seen as a galvanizing choice. And there is clearly the analogy to what you, Bruce, and Omari are choosing to do, to let the world see what this medical system has done to your partner, to the mother of your children, to your family, and to our community, going beyond the statistics to the specific story. So we are grateful to you both for being willing to share that. And it also does something to parents to lose their daughter. So Shawnee, I'd love to bring you in to talk about your experience in losing Shamani. And, you know, one of the statements, one of the things that gets said a lot is that, you know, knowledge is power. But you might have something to say about the power that comes from knowledge, given the fact that you are an advocate for birth equity, yet you recount the fact that knowing this did not help. It did not help your daughter to be able to survive a system that was not built or shaped in a way to acknowledge the vulnerability and the humanity of people like your daughter. So can you talk about how you've been grappling with the knowledge and knowing that this was a tragedy that still befell you, and what you are hoping that this film raises for the broader community?
Sure. Thank you, Kimberly, for the question. Yes, as I mentioned in the film, you know, it pains me that for years, after a decade and a half of doing this work, and Shamani and my second daughter, Jasmine, being part of the work, supporting me with events around reproductive rights and sexual and reproductive health, and us understanding the experiences of trauma and talking about it all the time. And when Shamani was moving through her first pregnancy, the presence of Omari, the presence of myself in those spaces, and talking about what the expectations were, and talking about the power of having a midwife and a doula and birthing at a particular institution. And then the second round, even amplifying that more, her wanting to do a home birth and how she was eating and how she was being, you know, very knowledgeable for herself, and then also surrounded by knowledgeable people. And then to have her die in this way was a blow on many levels. First, I struggled with a bit of guilt, but I'm grateful that I have the tools that I have just as a clinician and as someone who's been in healing spaces for most of my adult life, just being able to switch that really quickly, because I'm like, guilt will do you no good in this scenario. But just naively believing that all of that would be enough, even though I know what I know, right? The statistics, the conversations, the teaching, training, all that I have done, I still naively believe that all would be well, because we did our due diligence and we know what the outcome of that was, that she transitioned. And yeah, and so just speaking about Emmett Till, which is somebody that our family, you know, we know about, just the communities that we've been a part of, like a pivotal moment figuring in history and that choice. You know, what I want to make sure happens is that all of this gets exposed. White supremacy culture, the insidious nature in which it operates. Shamani's situation wasn't a smoking gun situation. It was a compilation of wrong moves and negligence and irresponsibility. Nothing like a punch in the gut, but the compiled experience is a punch in the gut, because she's not here, you know. And so really wanting the system to recognize that you can't train and develop folks who are going to be laying hands on folks, navigating them through major rites of passage like giving birth, anything that we deal with in the medical system, and not teach them, especially Black and brown folks receiving this service, not teaching the folks providing it, whether they're Black and brown or identify as white, about white supremacy culture, about implicit bias, about discrimination, and how we bring our lived experiences and our bigotry, whether it's conscious or unconscious, into the space. So having the overlay of training and development about anti-racism, and specifically anti-Black racism, teaching about our biases and how they get in the way and impact just how we show up and how we negotiate, how we listen. Mm-hmm. We listen through those filters, and then we take action. And so that habit, conscious or unconscious, can lead to near-death experiences or the snuffing out of a life, whether it's a seasoned person's life or a young person like Shawnee or Amber or other young women like them, that we need to do this work to prevent that from happening, because the ripple effect, like the film is called AFTERSHOCK, is devastating. We can't see what's ahead. Bruce, Omari, myself, and others can't see what's coming as a result of Shawnee not being here. And it's very tragic, and it could have been prevented.
Yeah. The ultimate infuriating and debilitating part of this is the preventability of it. And at the same time, one of the things that again, I so appreciated about the film, and in particular, your presence in it, is the way that I think many people try to distance themselves from the vulnerability by coming up with a whole range of, well, if this had happened or if that had happened. So the people who think, well, you need to know more about what's going to happen, or you need to read up on the experience, it kind of leads to the inference that, well, the mortality rate is the product of ignorance, our ignorance, right? Or it's a product of lack of prenatal care, our failure to maximize, a healthy outcome, or some other, dynamic that people want to latch onto to say, I don't have to worry about that, or my family doesn't have to worry about that. And I do think that one piece that may have started to make people wake up to the fact that these are all justifications that actually don't protect you is when Serena Williams almost died. So it was hard to say, she wasn't an advocate for herself, or she wasn't surrounded by people who were there with her, or she didn't know the system, or it was because of, poor health care decisions. People had to grapple in that moment. Oh, wow. It may not be any of these things that we're comfortable thinking. And so then the statistics come in. The fact that, Black women with advanced degrees are more likely to die in childbirth than white women without a high school diploma. I mean, those kind of things have to be said for people to grapple with the fact that all of the things that you are trying to get behind are not going to protect you from the possibility that this might happen to you or someone you love. So as you move through the conversations that people are having because of this film or your advocacy, what are you finding the most useful ways of showing people that all the things that they are thinking aren't really contributing to this issue? They've got to grapple just with the vulnerability, the historical racism, the misogynoir that is embedded in the medical healthcare system. What gets people to confront that in the way you want them to?
Sure. So I want to start with a quote, and I'm going to paraphrase. It's from a brother named Neely Fuller Jr. And he said, if you don't understand racism or white supremacy, what it is and how it works, everything you think you understand will only serve to confuse you. Mm-hmm. And so I just share unapologetically that how we have been indoctrinated in this country. And I say it, I do anti-racist training all the time. Before I was pre-verbal, when I was pre-verbal, I was inundated with imagery around what beauty looked like, what family looked like, what conflict looked like. And it unfortunately didn't look like me or my family or my experience. And I was taught, and sometimes folks who are my colleagues in this work will be like, stop saying this. But I'm like, it's true. Like, I've been indoctrinated to such a degree that there's a white supremacist that lives inside of me as a Black woman, because I've been inundated with all this information. And so I have to detoxify myself all the time and remind myself of what I know to be true, because the conditioning has me think that this is not enough, that I'm damaged goods, that perhaps what happens to me that's low vibrational is not happening, and just convincing myself that it's not racist what they're saying, it's not biased what they're doing. And so I have to constantly remind myself that this entire system was built around the toxic nature of whiteness. And people get it confused. They're like thinking I'm talking about this white person or that one white person. I'm like, white supremacy culture is an energy. It's like this enigma. It's like this thing that looms over all of us. And so one of my mantras is I expose myself to expand myself. So when you were speaking about people and Omari and Bruce and their responses, people were thinking I was in shock at my daughter's services, her funeral services, because of how I was addressing the public. I wasn't crying throughout the space. I wasn't falling out, rolling off, trying to pull her out of the casket. I'm like, we have 1,000+ people in this room at the homegoing service, and we had people who were live streaming it out to thousands more. And what I wanted them to know was that this scourge, this insidious Black maternal health crisis is killing us. So if you know a pregnant person, if you are trying to get pregnant, if you are young and it's a consideration for the future, you need to know that this is what's happening. And look at this casket. This beautiful young woman is gone because of that. And you may not be able to see everything clearly, but listen to what I'm saying right now so you can take action beyond this funeral service. And the other piece that was important for me to know is that, or for others to know, is that my daughter died one day. She lived thousands of days. So I didn't want maternal mortality or this system to have the final say about her life.
Yes,
and I'll say this last thing, because, you know, we want to hear from the brothers as more, and then Paula and Tonya, that I don't want us to walk away from hearing about Amber and her awesomeness and Shawnee and her awesomeness and think that women who are on drugs don't have a right to get adequate, powerful, multifaceted care and attention. I don't want you to think because some woman who's has issues around her weight, maybe has more weight on her body and she gets pregnant, that she's less important, or that she did something to herself to deserve this. This system is jacked up, and I don't want anybody to be operating like, or Serena Williams. That's important to know, and Shawnee and Amber and all the other stories are important to know. But I want the sister whose children were in foster care to everybody to get adequate, more than adequate care. And we get it twisted a lot. It's like, oh, they were so great. This shouldn't have happened. This shouldn't happen to anyone. I don't care how you identify or where you live or whether you work or whether you're on welfare. You deserve to be treated like a queen no matter what. And, you know, that's the things that I think are important for folks to know so that we can keep this from happening again.
Yeah, I so appreciate that. You know, and I'm sitting with so many of the parallels in the discourses that we deal with Say Her Name, and some of the ways that the death of Black women are framed in terms of whether they were deserving or not, whether there was something they could have done or not, without recognizing that the fact that they are Black is one of the conditions that allows for the institutional dynamics that endanger so many lives to continue. And so much of what you said in the film and the stories that you all told really bring that to bear. So I want to bring Tonya and Paula into the conversation through the lens of the divine alignment. I love that frame. So what brought each of you to this work, and in particular, the decision to tell this story the way that you have told it? Tonya, let me come to you first. What were you trying or hoping, to achieve in visiting an issue that had been talked about, surely, for a few years. What were you hoping a documentary would bring to the issue, and this particular way that you went about doing it?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Kimberly. Well, first of all, I've been in the work of women's health, particularly Black women's health, and the disparities of how Black women's outcomes are happen in this country for a long time. Back in 2007, the US Department of Health and Human Services asked me to be an infant mortality awareness raising, asked me to be a spokesperson for an infant mortality awareness raising campaign. And that's when I first learned that Black babies die at higher rates than white babies, you know, in this country. And then when you're talking about an infant's health, you're really talking about a woman's health. And so I did a small film back then, sort of around the issue of infant mortality and what we were doing at the time. And as I traveled around the country, and I was so fortunate that I was able to travel around the country and talk to groups of Black women in all kinds of different backgrounds in different places in the country, north, south, east, west, urban, rural. And inevitably, I would hear a story from someone who would tell me they knew someone who had passed away from childbirth complications. And you know, I really thought about the issue. I did other work, but you know, around 2017, 2018, these articles started coming out, and I was like, I better hurry up and do this documentary. I'd been wanting to do it, but I said, I better hurry up and do it, or else someone else is going to do it in a way that doesn't make me happy.
Yes.
And what I wanted to do several things. One, I wanted to dispel this narrative that I often read about in articles where it was this woman's fault. It was her fault that she died. She didn't get prenatal care, as you were saying. She didn't take care of herself. She wasn't educated. She was poor. All of these things were her fault why she died. And so I really wanted to show that actually it's not her fault. You know, it's the system's fault. I wanted to be able to show that Black women are not out here having babies. Some are, but not by themselves. I mean, even if a woman is a single parent, often she has people around her. She has a community around her. There is more to this woman than just her. And when she dies, we all are impacted and felt by and feel that. And so really wanted to bring that forth. And you know, when Paula and I had the chance to meet Shawnee, and I met Paula, and she'll tell you her story. But when Paula and I came together as filmmakers to tell this story, and we met Shawnee, who put that call out after Shamani passed away. Shawnee really put the call out. As she said, she wanted the world to have this conversation. And we were able to answer that call. And we met Shawnee, and then we met Omari, and then we met Bruce, to see how they, first of all, process their grief. One of the things, as someone who really cares a lot about health and wellness, mental health and wellness, I see Omari and Bruce. I mean, I love the scene in the film where they go running. I know for Omari, exercise was a real part of working through his grief, exercise and art, right? How you work through your grief. I think it's such a interesting, healthy way to think about moving through your grief. Towards the end of the film, when Bruce talks about, you know, when you just keep moving forward, you know, things open up, things change. I mean, I have been changed by Shawnee, Omari, and Bruce because of who they are. The grace that how they walk through this world with grace has had an amazing impact on me, and just how they are with their families. So I think the film, and obviously I wanted to tell the story of the statistics of the maternal mortality crisis, and also how we can fix it. But more than that, you know, really wanted to tell the human story, and just feel really fortunate to have been able to share these people with you.
And it does so many things so well. One of the things that we often hear from comm specialists, you know, as a social justice organization, we frequently, you know, have to say, why can't we get people, you know, worked up? Why can't we get them activated about this? And they say, you can give people all the facts you want, but if they don't accept your frame, if they have a frame that makes those facts, irrelevant, they'll reject your facts. It doesn't matter. You have to tell a story that allows them to see that their frame, their way of understanding the issue is flawed, so that then the facts do prompt the kind of engagement and action that you're looking for. And the best way to do that is to make it real, to tell the real stories about what has happened. In so many ways that you all chose to do that were so moving. Like from the very beginning, we actually, see. We don't get introduced to a statistic. We get introduced to expecting mothers, the excitement about having children. So we are not dealing with a flattened reality. We're dealing with something real. When you say that, you were worried about, someone else potentially telling this story and telling it poorly, I can imagine like 10 different ways that this could have gone down that would not have been nearly as moving as your choices were. On that note, Paula, how did you come to this? What was your pathway to this divine alignment?
Thank you, Kimberly, and thank you so much for just being able to share space with you here and everyone else. I came to this film as a mother and as an artist. And I'll start with, as an artist, the stories I tell are centered in people. It's called character-driven films. That's how I decide to tell a story. It's through the people I meet. And often it's about a social justice issue and particularly women's health, and how film can be a medium for impact. One of my past projects, 93 Queen, explores misogyny within the Hasidic community and the health disparities there. And that film led to the licensure of the first all-female ambulance corps in the US and ambulances for this corps. And I saw firsthand what the tangible change film can make when you center the people at the core of the issue. So that's just my artistic background. And in terms of maternal health, I happen to be a mom of 4. And with my first child, I experienced, I was 23 and I was my foray into the system. And from that birth and pregnancy to my 4th child, my COVID baby, I experienced a lot of trauma and not being seen and heard in the system, in this American system we have here. But while I was, as Tonya mentioned, in 2017, articles started coming out, particularly from ProPublica, exposing this US maternal health crisis. And I remember sitting in my bed at night reading the article about Shalon Irving. And just in my bed for hours, just reading it and crying and realizing the injustice that was going on, and that what I experienced in the system is profoundly affecting Black women and killing Black women. And I thought that at that moment, like, I need to use whatever skill set I have to uplift these stories. And the only way to tell the story of the US maternal health crisis is centering Black women. There's no other way to do that. This is the only way, really, to tell the story. And that being said, I wanted to co-direct this film from the get-go. I wanted to find a partner, creative partner, grounded in the community, and had a shared vision of telling a character-driven story. So I set out and got some development funding to research and try to, find the story of this film. And one of the early development shoots, I met Tonya, and I had been speaking to other people, like a lot of other people, and something was always off, that there wasn't the right fit. And when I met Tonya, and knew who she was from her work as a producer and her work as an advocate, I thought, this is really a match, a divine match. And that was incredible. And then, really what for me grounded this entire process was attending that AFTERSHOCK event that Shawnee spoke of that honored Shamani's life. And I, remember just being in that space and it's not, hyperbole to say, like, I felt like my soul was elevated. It was just this beautiful communal gathering, as Shawnee said, with art and dance, and just, Shamani was alive, and I didn't know Shamani, but from just being in that space, I felt close to this woman, and that was like transformative for me as an artist and as a person to be in that space. And as Tonya said, Shawnee then became our guiding light, and we met, of course, Omari and Bruce, and became this family. But it's all about the people and the lived experiences here.
Which is beautifully captured. I mean, I think all of us get the spirit in which all of the mothers who are lost touched their families, and by extension touched all of us. I want to ask a little bit more about the pieces of the film that actually go into what the aspects of the medical profession are that create these traumas. And there were some surprises in it for, I think, all of us. Like, we know that the ways that the issue is often framed are incorrect, but we don't really know what the there is. So in particular, how maternal mortality has increased as the increasing use of cesarean sections, how that's happened, and then how Black women end up being on the bottom side of that. I think a lot of people are going to be surprised to see that, and they're going to be surprised to know what some of the motive is behind that. So, Shawnee, in the parts of the film where we're in the hospital, when we're in the hospital in Oklahoma, when we're looking at, the managed nature of the care and the intersections of patriarchy, sexism, and capitalism, quite frankly, it is an intersectional tornado. It is the confluence of all of these factors that leads to that. What is most important for viewers to take away from that? What is it that you want people to be able to see with 100% acuity?
Sure. Thank you for the question. One of the things that I joke about, and I guess it's a bit of morbid humor on one side of it, is that the two things that are guaranteed, and I might be wrong about this, with the way we're going, is that babies are going to be born and people are going to die, right? And interestingly enough, those are the areas where the monetization, the commodification, just thinking about how, Omari and my experience of burying Shamani, and, we had awesome people that were supporting us, that are in that field, but it's just like, it costs a lot of money to lay someone to rest. And it also, the way that things are going, it's like, there's money to be made from making almost like a factory out of women laboring and delivering. It's like, oh, this is too long. How can we shorten this? How can we keep moving these beds? How can we make this go faster? So I was watching, and this is like foreshadowing for me. When my son, who's almost 18, was born, I was part of another documentary, a short piece of it called The Business of Being Born. And I just remembered, some of you may be familiar, but we were there for our 6-week checkup. And they have another round, something else coming out that are by the same folk. And, just thinking about the beautiful experience I had of having a midwife that took her time with me, and no medication, just pushing my son out, big baby, we kept moving and shifting the bed, and I had my family around me. Shamani was there, my daughter Jasmine, and other young people were there watching my birth. And I was just like, that was like an anomaly.
Yes.
That, they try to move you. And so in a piece that I was watching just earlier today, they kept saying pit. They got a nickname for Pitocin. Pitocin is called pit. Did you use the pit? Do they need the pit? And I'm like, yes, give them the drugs, have the mother feel or the birthing person feel kind of shook. It's like, oh, this is taking long. The baby might be under distress. You think you want to move this along. Let's take the pit and get the contractions going. The heartbeat is shifting. Maybe because you use the pit, the baby's under distress. It's like, oh, we're worried about the baby. It's just like scaring you into going in the direction of doing something other than what your body knows how to do, which is to take its time and to move through and push the baby out in the baby's time and your body's time. Mm-hmm. So where we started to get it really twisted, and it's touched upon in the film, is the medicalization of birth, the making out that birth is like a sickness that you need to go to the hospital to care for. And then this machine-like way of dealing create the space where it's a win to move them bodies and to make the money. The medication, the anesthesiologist gets paid, and the person who cuts you open gets paid, and the extended care and the recovery space get paid. And then moving new pregnant women who are laboring and delivering into the space where you were laboring and delivering, and they pushed you along. It's tragic, and it's a cocktail for what we're getting: more death, more near-death experiences, and more conversations like this. And it's extremely sad, and it's inhumane.
And it is historical. I mean, what was striking to me is how Black women end up being on the industrialized death of childbearing, right? So historically, Black bodies were used to create wealth. Black bodies were used to create knowledge. Now Black bodies are being used, Black birthing bodies are being used to create wealth again, just this time through the actual process. You don't know those connections if the history isn't being told. And what I appreciated so much about the film was it was unwilling to turn away from the ugly history out of which this contemporary problem grows, telling the truth about the torture of Black women, telling the truth about the lack of care about our bodies, telling the truth about being experimented on to create the very knowledge that is largely being deprived, Black women are being deprived of. And so on that note, my sense is that, number one, this is going to be an incredibly important film in talking about the history of misogynoir, the history of Black health disparities, the history of knowledge being based on our bodies, but we not getting the benefit of it. And I also think because of that, this is a film that some places might not want to show or even be allowed to show because it does tell the truth. And we're not in a moment, Tonya, I'm coming to you on this, where truth telling is suddenly something that is in some places potentially illegal. At least it's criticized. This is a problem that you cannot understand without understanding institutionalized racism, historical racism, and even implicit bias. So when you think about doing a project like this, when people try to legislate against the real message that you're bringing, how do you think about the importance of this kind of storytelling and this kind of art against censorship of those who don't want to hear precisely the message that the film is bringing?
Well, I would also add, it's not just implicit bias, it's very explicit. From the stories that we've heard Bruce talking about, his story, I mean, Shawnee and Omari talking about them asking about drugs. I mean, and I've heard it from across the gamut. The bias is not implicit, it is explicit out there. And look, I mean, unfortunately, the people who really need to hear it are the ones who don't want to hear it, but it's important that we tell the truth, that we put it out there, and it will start a conversation. The good news is, though, that people are asking to see the film. There are people who need to see the film. There are hospitals, there are insurance companies that have reached out to us saying that they would like to use the film to open up a conversation. And so our hope is that the film really becomes a conversation starter. There will be people who will push back probably, or try to push back against some of what we have said in the film, but You know, they can push back, but it's a conversation we're going to have. And the only other thing I do want to add is that, you know, I think part of the solution is also going to midwives being integral in our women's health in general. So I like to say we learned that when, you know, with our food source, we thought we could source it from so far away and we had to go back from farm to table. I argue that when it comes to birthing, we need to, the data is there. The data proves that integrated midwifery care has better birthing outcomes for all women. And when the United States adapts that modality, we will see that there are better outcomes, and we need more Black midwives as well.
Absolutely. And I love the part where we grapple with what happened to midwifery and what happened to Black women as midwives when the professionalization was framed in terms of pushing them out. That's where the actual knowledge, and we've seen this story again and again and again, where knowledge is basically erased and marginalized in the pursuit of professionalization. And that almost always comes with a change in who it is that is equipped and empowered to actually practice that knowledge. So in midwifery, it's Black women being pushed out. I mean, let's think about it. I often tell people, if you start with the fact that Black folk, there were 700,000 Black folk in 1790. By the eve of the Civil War, we were 4 million. How did that happen? Let's just be honest. How did that happen? And who brought those people into the world?
And they were good enough to bring those people into the world then.
Yes.
And then when it became something where they could make money from it, suddenly they were no longer good enough.
Absolutely. So, Omari, I want to come to you because one of the things that I was most struck with in telling the story of, you know, both the history and the experience, the ways in which art, and I call it artivism, has also been a vehicle, both for healing, for communication, for activation, and for you, just the connections that you are building with other fathers who are similarly situated. So, you know, and it really resonates with us because a lot of the work we do on Say Her Name is built around artivism, around ritual, around not just telling a story of loss, but telling a story of the whole human and their entire life, and making them live through that. So how has art been a vehicle for you, and what is it that you're using your art to do?
Definitely. So you spoke about it earlier, just in terms of us knowing the statistics and just how bad they are, you know, but, you know, we have come to do this thing with our brains where if we don't see it, then it's not really true. If we hear it, okay, that's fine, it's sad, and then we move on, you know, but you know, like you said, when you're able to tie a name to these statistics, a face to these statistics, the life that actually is behind these statistics, then it's a whole different experience. It's a whole entirely different feeling. You know, so me, essentially, like, that wasn't my purpose, to be totally honest. That wasn't where I was going with it. It was essentially me just having this vision of wanting to create a portrait of Shawnee. And the crazy thing with it was that prior, like, I've done about 4, 5, 6 different paintings of her, you know, just through my grief and me using art as a way to emote. But creating specifically, actually, this image right here was the catalyst for me then wanting to create other portraits, excuse me. So after I got the vision, or just, you know, ancestors guided me to create this picture of Shawnee, it was literally a voice in my head that said, create a picture of Amber, and then create a picture of Kiera, and then create a picture of Maria Corona, and create a picture of Tasha Dickey, and so on and so forth. And, you know, while doing this, in that process of painting, where I'm sitting down with these women for hours, you know, and looking at them, looking at their features, the details, you know, you really kind of get a sense for me of who they were as people, why they were loved, and the energy that they, you know, push out. And I could feel that energy as I put it down, you know. So in that process, you know, it's that piece. But then for me, it offered something, one, that wasn't offered to a family prior. And then two, gave me an ability to speak to the family about who these women were so that I can create the images, but also tell the story of them as being mothers, as being educators, having these postgraduate degrees, having these loves for music and taking their children somewhere, and, you know, just being in the family, you know, being a part of a family unit. It was powerful and impactful. And then having the ability to actually physically give them something that's tangible.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
it really kind of takes that relationship and that connection that we have to another level.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the most powerful moments is when you embodied one of the women and gave the art and gave the image to her partner. And it very much reminded me, we had at an earlier point in some of our work, one of the things that we did was created large posters of some of the women who were killed by the police. And in the ritual, and this is one of the reasons I was so struck by the use of ritual, we wanted to both symbolize that we see her, we hold her, and we're giving her back to you. And so we passed the posters through a crowd of hundreds, people literally carrying her on their shoulder to return to the family. And it seemed to, it symbolized and materialized both our recognition of her existence and our stewardship of her legacy and return to the family. And I got so much the same feeling watching you travel and actually, deliver that. And at the same time, building a community out of other fathers. It was so incredibly, moving to see that. So thank you for that. Thank you for that. And Bruce, someone said in the film that a Black woman giving birth is like a Black man at a traffic stop. And it immediately resonated. I mean, everyone got it. But here's the thing, there's also the intersection of those two things, the Black man being surveilled and the Black woman being in a place where his recognition of his being surveilled makes it that much more difficult for him to be an advocate for her. So before we go, I didn't want to leave without asking you to share that experience of being there for her and being subject to the same kind of surveillance that Black men experience throughout society.
Yes, thank you. And it's we obviously see these disparities each and every day. And to me, this is a form of genocide. How women are being treated in the hospitals, how men are being treated in the policing system. We're being killed from each and every way. And we're paying taxes for these programs that don't work for us. It's almost like we're paying for our own ticket. And I really want to highlight and really just bring out those statistics, because over 60% of the women that are receiving C-sections shouldn't be receiving C-sections. So they're obviously, and it's going on in these areas where, in these hospitals that are being so substantially underfunded, which is our communities. And they're making a profit off of Black and brown bodies. And that's just what we have to highlight, and that's what we have to show. And and really center the power behind what community can do, because we can stand up for each other and we can say, this is enough. You don't want to help our Black women in these hospitals. We will create our own hospitals. We will create our own programs that are designed to work for us, because we're supposed to trust and believe in these systems that were never designed to work for us in the first place. And that's how they got us. These disparities were being pushed into general hospitals in 1815 throughout 1830. Throughout the 1830s. And this is, these are things that have just been happening to us. And I think it's about time that people are waking up and people are starting to see these disparities.
And Bruce, share with everyone what you're planning to do, what you are trying to do in order to respond to and take control of our birthing experiences.
So unfortunately, due to the negligence behind Amber's care, she was too high risk to have a home birth. She was too high risk to be seen in a birthing center. So right now I'm working on creating and opening the first freestanding midwifery-led birthing center in the Bronx, and hopefully beyond, as a way of, showing that we want to provide adequate care for ourselves. And then just seeing how I was treated even after Amber's death, and all of the things that I had to fight for. And I remember specifically us speaking to a therapist from the hospital, and before even giving us the proper evaluations, they're already throwing drugs in our face like Xanax and other stronger antidepressants. And I'm thinking to myself, is this what they're really doing to the Black and Brown community? Yes. How am I supposed to take care of my newborn child who just lost his mother if I'm doped up on drugs and I'm left incompetent to take care of my child? And this is what we're seeing in the Black and Brown communities. So that's when I partnered with Mark Bishop. He was a programmer for Black people, blackpeoplemeet.com, Match.com. And right now we're working on a mental health app designed as a matchmaking app for the Black and Brown people as well. I've been crafting legislation alongside state legislators as well to try to redirect the course of birthing equity that will accommodate us, as well as, just really trying to create all of these programs that I've seen these flaws in that weren't helping me, and trying to figure out how we can really serve and help our demographic.
And Bruce, how can people get involved if they want to support, if they want to partner, if they want to amplify your work?
Please visit the SaveARoseFoundation.org. We have all of our information up there. We have rallies listed. We have events that we have posted, and of course work that we've done and things that we are working on. We're always looking for people that want to help or people that want to donate. Because we're still fighting this. This is I know even after the film ended, this is still a life that we have to wake up to every day. That's and right. We have to fight every day for our lives. And this is really a way for a means of us taking care of our families, ourselves, and our communities, because this is who we do it for. So SaveARoseFoundation.org. Message us directly on there, or SaveARoseFoundation@gmail.com. I take all of my inquiries there, or you could also reach out to us at Save a Rose Foundation, or Bismack III on Instagram as well.
Thank you so much. Shawnee, what's next for you, and how can people get involved and support and amplify?
Sure, thank you. So what's next? What I will continue to do is to offer support to those who have experienced reproductive loss and trauma or dealing with infertility. I've been doing that for many years through free support groups and services. We're preparing, because we're big on I'm making up a word, but de-siloing this work. It's like regional work. It's like, no, what COVID did is offered an opportunity for us to connect and co-create with one another. And I'm committed to that. There's no way that myself, Omari, Bruce, Paula, Tonya, and others like us that are in this work and do this alone. There are not enough bodies to make the shift. This is like shifting or turning the Titanic. And so we're co-creating for Black Maternal Health Week that's coming up in April. We're producing a 7-day event, a series that will happen in the evening times from 7 to 9 p.m. And the focus of it is having our say, creating a new narrative for the future of Black maternal health. And every night we'll talk about sexual and reproductive health through the life cycle, all the things like respectful care and postpartum care, because now we know that we need to be looking and paying attention to Black and brown birthing people up until a year after they give birth. It's a shame, but that's what we have to do. Always creating opportunities. I'll do my annual Motherwick conference. Omari and I will continue to do the AFTERSHOCK event, which the documentary was named after, so that we can keep educating and transforming the community. And every day I'm reached out to asking about doulas and support around processing reproductive trauma and loss. And I'll continue to do that as a psychotherapist and healer in the community. I also want to just share really quickly, there's a message that I have for those who've experienced that are watching this, because there's a lot of folks, more than we think, that are dealing with reproductive issues around infertility, endometriosis, and fibroids, and just all of this. And just speaking about resilience, and that doesn't mean you just keep getting pummeled. That's not what I'm talking about, but just being able to recognize that there are you're demonstrating that you're resilient by showing up for a session like this, or asking questions, or holding your folks accountable, or just taking a breath before you jump right into work or doing something else for someone else. So just speaking about the 6 domains really quickly: vision, composure, reasoning, tenacity, health and well-being, and collaboration are all the domains. And give yourself some credit. If you don't have all 6 working, some of them are working, and you're demonstrating that you're still able to press forward even inside of the most tragic situations. And that's not just for me, for me to remember Omari or Bruce or even Tonya and Paula, because the residual, what would they call vicarious trauma, just by watching the film footage and all of that, we all need to keep remembering that we're still standing and that we can make a difference and not operate like we can't. And I'm complete.
Thank you so much. Paula, what's next for the film?
Yeah, we're just getting started, which is hard to believe, but we are. The film will come out on Hulu in the US and Disney Plus worldwide in 2022. And alongside of the release of the film, we'll be continuing to do events like this and really strategizing around impact. So the activists like Shawnee, Omari, and Bruce can use this film as a tool to enhance their work and do that. So there's a lot more of the impact coming. And I just have a final thought I wanted to share just from listening so much today, and just thinking again about the midwives and really this it was an amazing propaganda campaign and a marketing campaign because it worked, which is in such an insidious way. And it's such an example of how racism and structural racism poisons the air and the well for everyone around it. And taking those midwives away has affected the entire US culture around birth for every birthing person in this country. So racism doesn't only affect Black people, it affects everybody just by virtue of being in that space, in the same way that Shawnee spoke about white supremacy. So I hope that for non-Black people watching this, they understand that by being complicit in this toxicity, you are poisoning yourself as well.
Thank you so much for making that abundantly clear. This is all of our issue, and the fact that this exists actually endangers everyone differently, but nonetheless, it's a factor in the entire healthcare system. Omari, how can people support you and your work moving forward?
Definitely. So for us, again, it's about just being creative, using our creativity, our artistry, our innovativeness in order to, reimagine systems, reimagine the world that we want to live in holistically. So everybody can go to the ariafoundation.org. You can find that information there. And then also you can go to Aftershock Doc. If you go to Aftershock Doc, they have my information as far as the ARIA Foundation, Shawnee and I's foundation, and also Bruce's foundation. You can click the links on there to get all the information, all the abouts, all the donation pages, and all that great stuff that, you know, we need, like Bruce said, to keep this fight, going. OmariMaynard.com is my personal website. That's where you can find my artwork. And I have a page specifically that explains the In Her Honor series that I created in order to honor the women who are fallen soldiers due to maternal mortality. And then just also too, like, you know, Shawnee said, maternal mortality is one piece, but the maternal morbidity piece is a whole nother other animal. So all the women who have been suffering from maternal morbidity, please don't feel like it's something that you are dealing with as well as in a silo. And it's not something that's common, because it is too common, but it shouldn't be something that you feel like is the reality. And that's where it should be, because it really should not. So again, ARIA Foundation, the ariafoundation.org. You can see my work at OmariMaynard.com. Follow us on the ARIA Foundation on IG, and then my Instagram is M_U_Z.
Thank you so much, Omari. And Tonya, of course, last but certainly not least, what do you want to leave our audience with?
You know, again, while this has been, as Shawnee said, there's a lot of trauma that we witnessed through the film. And there has been trauma that these families have gone through, but there is hope. And we can fix this. There are things in the world that we can't fix, but we really can improve birthing outcomes in the United States for all people if we all hands on deck and we all figure out a way that we can contribute. And so I would just say, you know, follow Shawnee, Omari, and Bruce, support them, find other people out there doing work, and see where you can plug in, because you have a role to play. And I just want to thank you, Kimberly Crenshaw and AAPF, for having us here today to have this conversation, because that's part of the process. So thank you so very much.
Thank you so much. And I know our audience appreciates the conversation. We thought we would just have a quick conversation, but you cannot have a quick conversation about this, and you can't have a quick conversation about this amazing documentary. I really can't thank today's panelists enough, Shawnee, Omari, Bruce, Paula, and Tonya, for their time, their confidence in bringing this conversation to this forum, their thoughtfulness in their essential work. To have a film like this, evidence of how powerful and important an intersectional lens can be in understanding and responding to the maternal mortality crisis facing Black women. It is such a gift to all of us. It's activated us with a vital energy that we'll need to interrupt the medical and social practices that endanger our lives and the lives of so many of those that we love. I want to say also that this event and this entire week would not have been possible without the time and effort of our team at the African American Policy Forum. We look forward to you joining us as Her Dream Deferred programming continues tomorrow at 8 p.m. with Labor of Love, Cultivating Restorative Spaces for Women Activists, Healers, and Caregivers. For more information about this week's programming, please visit us at aapf.org/HDD and our social media channels on Twitter and Instagram. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you can stay with us throughout the week as we continue to uplift the stories of Black women and girls.
Latasha Walton, say a name. Latasha Walton, say a name. Latasha Walton, say a name. Say a name, won't you say a name? A Tatiana Jefferson, a Tatiana Jefferson, a Tatiana Jefferson, say a name.